Kyle Harrison, who might be the best pitching prospect in baseball, he's going to be in big league camp. And I think people are sleeping on the fact that he could make a big impact on the San Francisco Giants in 2023.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide episodes 3 days a week for this week, then back to 5 starting next week, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And where we get started is the Giants. I mean, they had FanFest on Saturday, so we'll get into some of what was said at FanFest. And also they released their list of non-roster invitees. And this is always kind of a low-key, like, hardcore fan exciting kind of thing, but really it's not even low-key when you look at, of course, yes, there are some minor league signings they made that are interesting, yada, 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 but really it's the prospects. And to me, this is the big story for the Giants going into 2023. And ironically, I feel like people are kind of down on the farm system exactly at the moment when there's more reason for optimism than there's been in a while. I get it that some guys had bad years or down years or injury-plagued years or whatever in their minor league system in 2022, but I think generally speaking, it seems like the average fan and even reporter at times reads a little bit too much into these objective kind of rankings that we see every year. Like, I think a lot of people sleep on the fact that going into last year, Baseball Prospectus had the Giants ranked as the number 2 farm system in baseball. And so these rankings, I keep saying this, but was Logan Webb ever considered a top prospect? No. Was Camilo Doval? No. And so you take them with a grain of salt, but also they had a down year, and so people are going to rank them lower. But at the same time, the reason I'm not just like being blindly optimistic here. What gets me excited is that the likes of Kyle Harrison, Casey Schmitt, and some relievers too, and are gonna probably some potentially high-end relievers are gonna debut for the San Francisco Giants in 2023. And Kyle Harrison, I mean, legitimately, if he reaches his potential, you could have 2 homegrown front of the rotation arms, with Harrison, of course, coming with 6+ years of team control. Logan Webb has 3 more. You've already got some young players like Thairo Estrada had some good development. Joey Bart, there's still the potential there. That's the thing, too, is when guys graduate, they don't count in your prospects lists. And so guys like Joey Bart having graduated, that hurts your prospect, rankings or whatever. But Kyle Harrison, he's going to be in big league camp. He's a non-roster invitee. What this means is that they're not on the 40-man. So all of these non-roster guys are in major league camp with the, 40-man guys, but they are not on the 40-man. So Kyle Harrison is one of those guys. Also, Casey Schmitt going to be there. How about Vaughn Brown, another guy? So those are the 3 who really stand out to me when I look at this list. And I just think it's kind of ironic. And also, I want to point out that it seems like there was all this talk like, oh, give up whatever it takes to get Juan Soto, even trade Kyle Harrison, trade Marco Luciano, give up whatever it takes for a rental of Shohei Ohtani. Like, we had mock trade proposals in which you're giving up Harrison and Luciano for 1 season of Ohtani. To me, that never made any sense at all. And then Brian Reynolds, etc. And yet, I feel like there's, at the same time, a lot of people are saying the future of the Giants entirely depends on successfully kind of having their prospects have success. And I also feel like we're sleeping on the successes that they have had. Guys like Logan Webb and Camilo Doval are huge development success stories. And then some guys in their system like Vaughn Brown, check out the season he had in 2022, completely came out of nowhere and put himself on the map. And here he is in big league camp. He's going to start in Double-A, I think, and Marco Luciano also going to start in Double-A. Luis Matos probably also going to start in Double-A. So it's not inconceivable at all that at the end of 2023, you could have seen Kyle Harrison establish himself as a really good 21, 22-year-old front of the rotation, hopefully type arm. And you could see perhaps Casey Schmitt. There's a really good nugget here from Gabe Kapler talking about a possible position change for the elite defender Casey Schmitt. We'll get into that a little bit later. But you could see him perhaps establish himself at the major league level. That's not a guarantee. I think Harrison is far more likely, assuming health, to impact the major league team this year. Schmidt, though, reached AAA at the end of last year. It's just he didn't spend a lot of time even in Double-A. So not a ton of upper minors, quote-unquote, experience. But Harrison, he pitched a ton in Double-A. So he's going to start in AAA, I would think. And Farhan Zaidi has literally said that there's definitely a strong chance we're going to see Harrison impact the major league team this year, and it could even be early in the season. And so suddenly, they've already got a deep rotation. If you suddenly add Harrison and you've got Webb and you've got Cobb and your other guys, you're suddenly just kind of swimming in starting pitching talent. And there's also some intriguing bullpen arms. So anyway, what I'm saying is it's not inconceivable. Harrison has established himself. Hopefully Schmidt, that'll be a big key. David VR, we didn't even mention him. He's not a guy who appeared on top prospects lists, even though he had such a monster season last year in the minors and had a good end of his season. And then you could be seeing Marco Luciano and Luis Matos, perhaps Von Brown even makes it to the majors this year. But if not, Luciano and Matos and Brown, you could see all of them kind of in that same position that we're currently talking about Harrison and Schmidt, in that they're right on the doorstep of the majors. And for a guy like Luciano, it feels like we've been waiting on him forever, but he's still very young. I believe he's 21 years old right now. And so that's the thing, is this is not the moment to be your most pessimistic. I feel like in 2-3 years ago, when these guys were so far away, your top prospects were like Joey Bart and Elliot Ramos. And the thing is, they have, Joey Bart has characteristics that I've said this repeatedly, I'm not sure that this front office would have drafted Joey Bart. And so the fact that Bart hasn't turned into a superstar, you obviously can't hold it against the current regime because they didn't draft him. But also you look at guys like Luciano, I feel like Farhan Zaidi gets credit for signing Marco Luciano, but he didn't. It was the previous regime. And so let's be clear about that. But this regime, they picked Kyle Harrison, and that's looking like a pretty darn good pick there. And he's going to have a chance. If you go to spring training or if you watch the games that are televised, you're probably going to see some of Kyle Harrison. And then if you're just a Giants fan in general, you might see him make an impact pretty early on in the 2023 season in San Francisco. And that's exciting. And so it's great that he's going to be in camp. So coming up in just a minute, that position change for Casey Schmitt, it has wide-ranging ramifications, possible position change. I'm not saying they're permanently changing his position, but they may be expanding his repertoire on the field to include an important position on the diamond. So we'll get into that in just a minute. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Are you looking for a delicious treat but don't want all of the fat and calories? Then you've got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays recently. It is February, and I know a lot of times New Year's resolutions are falling by the wayside at this time of year, but with Built, you're able to stick with that resolution. I know that I am, because they're delicious like a candy bar. I promise you that. And yet, unbelievably healthy macros, covered in 100% real chocolate, flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and yet we're talking only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and 17 grams of protein in a typical bar. And now you don't have to wait to get a box. Head to your nearest Walmart, go to the pharmacy section, and you can pick up a box of Built Bars. Or if you're near Sam's Club, run in and you can grab a 13-bar box with hit flavors like brownie batter and churro. You can thank me later. All right, as promised, just more about this non-roster invitee list and just the Giants farm system and hypocrisy is a strong word, but I'm seeing a lot of, it's just funny. I feel like a lot of times the public sentiment kind of goes in the wrong direction at the wrong time. And this is not the time for me to be doom and gloom about the farm system. Like, you're kind of living under a rock if you're not a little bit excited about guys like Kyle Harrison coming up in 2023, and then someone like Casey Schmitt. It's just, if you're like beholden to the rankings, and it's like Keith Law said that the Giants farm system is 18th, and so therefore they are 18th, and that's not acceptable. They should be higher. Well, again, it was a down year for a lot of guys. And so they just like have to do this. They have to bump you down when someone like Luciano misses a bunch of time and has a low back injury, and he comes back and he doesn't play great, but he was really good before. They're not just going to shoot you up the rankings thinking that maybe Luciano will rebound to be healthy. So year to year, just kind of following the rankings and deciding that's what this means about the farm system. I will not stop saying that tell me the highest anybody ranked Logan Webb in a top 100 list, and show me all the people who were rated above him who have gone on to be possibly even guys who never even have made it to the majors yet. And in almost all cases, guys who have gone on to be worse so far in their major league careers. And so it is really difficult to kind of nail down the value of these unproven players. And I don't know, I think I'm a little bit higher on their system than the public sentiment right now. And what is specifically exciting to me is that these guys are close to the majors, at least some of them. We're finally going to start to see some, to me, like, of their higher end prospects. Kyle Harrison is probably number one right now for them in terms of their prospects, and he is the closest to the majors of anybody. Casey Schmitt, I think, is kind of being slept on a little bit. And so we're gonna get into him in just a second. Thanks, by the way, for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Locked On MLB Prospects host, speaking of prospects, Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. So this coming from Gabe Kapler, who basically just revealed at FanFest, according to Susan Slusser, that third base prospect Casey Schmitt could see some time at shortstop. And so back up a second. That's a big deal because, we look at the Giants roster. We look at how defense has been an issue. We look at how Brandon Crawford is entering the last year of his contract, and he's, getting up there in age. And so I received a mailbag question not long ago asking about what is the future at the shortstop position for the San Francisco Giants beyond 2023. And even in 2023, if Crawford goes down, is it really just Tyro Estrada and kind of pray that works out? And what happens if you miss both of those guys? They didn't necessarily have a clear solution. So for Schmitt, I'm not the biggest proponent in the world of taking a guy who's so good at a specific spot on the diamond and then moving him to a spot where maybe he won't be. It's kind of like Manny Machado, right? They did this in the majors with Machado. He's such a good defensive third baseman, but at times they've kind of moved him to shortstop where he wasn't as good. And so it kind of is it better to be a great defensive shortstop or a great defensive third baseman, or a decent defensive shortstop? And it's kind of a valid argument to make. So Schmitt is so good defensively at third, but I personally didn't see this, but I think it was when Luciano went down with that low back strain, Casey Schmitt, who was in that same high A Eugene league with Luciano, shifted over to shortstop. And again, I didn't watch a lot of these games, but the reports are, from what I've heard, that Schmitt did a good job there, or at least a passable job there. And so for Schmitt to have that in his toolbox to be able to play short in addition to third, it could help him get to the major leagues faster, potentially. It could potentially solve a problem for the Giants down the road in starting next year. Like I said, if Schmitt has a good season, a good start in AAA, and he gets that opportunity in the majors, let's say David Villar is doing well in the majors at third base. Are you just going to not call up Schmitt because Villar is kind of planted there at third? Well, having Schmitt be able to play short, obviously you have Crawford, but just having that positional versatility, I think, adds opportunities for you as a player. And, if something happens for the Giants and they need a shortstop, but they don't need a third baseman, it helps your opportunity and it helps the team itself. And so for Schmitt, he just had a really, really good season, and he's another one of these guys who got close to the majors. He reached AAA. He only played 29 games in Double-A, and then they bumped him to Triple-A where he played 4 games. And so he does not have a lot of upper minors experience, but assuming he starts at Triple-A, which is where he ended last year, it's a lively offensive environment. And so if you play really good defense at third and are just tearing it up offensively, which is not hard to imagine given the offensive environment and given the season that he had last year, then it would be hard to hold him down for too long. I think they probably want to give him a solid, a couple months probably at least, unless there's some kind of an injury. But in that case, I mean, like I said, it's just not that hard to imagine that at some point Casey Schmitt gets a good run here in 2023. And it's good insurance to have if, David VR struggles, then you could send him down. And let's say he struggles and Schmitt is tearing it up, then it's a good exchange there to make. And so, again, I think people are down on the young talent at exactly the wrong time, because it's not just Schmitt and Harrison. It's also guys like VR. It's also guys like Webb who are still around for at least 3 more years. It's guys like Doval who are around for at least 5 more years. It's guys like Tyro Estrada who are around for at least 4 more years. And so they've got some pieces there. And I don't know, I just think it's the wrong time to be super down. And then you fast forward to next year and you're looking at hopefully Marco Luciano being ready to make a contribution early on in 2024. And so there's also pitchers, and some of these pitchers are in camp with the Giants as well, including RJ Dabovich. And when I say pitchers, I mean there's also relievers to be excited about for me. And RJ Dabovich is another guy who Farhan Zaidi specifically called out when talked about who could make kind of an impact in the bullpen, who are some young guys. And Dabovich is not on the 40-man roster. I think we may have seen him last year if he didn't have this kind of poor performance in a very small sample in AAA, but he was doing very well in AA. So coming up in just a minute, what to expect out of this bullpen, specifically the chance of RJ Dabovich making an impact and some other young relievers as well. And then I want to talk about the Giants catcher situation. They did finally finalize their deal with Roberto Perez. And so we'll discuss what that deal was and what it means for the Giants at the catcher position in just a minute. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This year, the only app that you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We are really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the #1 sportsbook in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. And download the FanDuel app now so you can bet on Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to who will score a touchdown. And if you're a baseball junkie like me, you can bet on baseball as well. And this is something I keep talking about. But their Rookie of the Year odds, I think it's a real opportunity here with Kyle Harrison at plus 4,500. If you look at some of the top rookies here, like Corbin Carroll, the odds are plus 350. And so for Harrison, I just think it's underselling his odds here. And even a guy like Marco Luciano is ahead of Harrison, which doesn't make sense because Harrison's proximity to the majors is just much closer. And so that's an opportunity there at FanDuel. So be sure to check that out. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, super easy to use, and best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at FanDuel.com/lockedon to claim your no-sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, as promised, I want to just get into the bullpen guys, which I think is another aspect of this team that's being slept on a little bit. And then also just the Giants finalizing their deal with Roberto Perez, the catcher, and what that means about the catcher position. So the bullpen guys, I keep mentioning this and I just feel like it deserves to be mentioned repeatedly that, a guy like RJ Dabovich, he may not be on the 40-man roster, but he's in Major League camp there. And he is going to have a chance to be potentially an impact reliever for the San Francisco Giants. If you look at what did he do in 2022, I mean, he started out in AA where he had a strikeout rate of 36%, a walk rate of just 5.7%, had a 2.70 ERA, but a FIP of 1.73. allowed just, it looks like probably one homer. Yeah, one home run in those 26 and 2/3 innings. Moved to AAA, strikeout rate was 29%, and suddenly he had a walk rate of 18.7%. I guess it was a bigger sample than I thought. This was 24 and 2/3 innings. So Dan Szymborski over at Fangraphs, who does the Zips projections, has said that he doesn't think Dabovich deserved that high of a walk rate, looking at the kind of pitch data. Maybe the umpires were squeezing him. I don't know exactly what happened there, but it wasn't really an issue like that until he got to AAA. And so I would kind of write that off because he, in the same number of innings, had an excellent walk rate in AA. And so simply put, if this guy can just like attack the strike zone, I think that he could be a good reliever. And the projections, the Zips projections have him with a 3.51 ERA. This is a guy who hasn't even debuted in the majors. So he could get that opportunity early. I also think that Cole Waits is a guy we saw at the end of last year, and he could be a guy who could potentially be a good reliever for the Giants. And he's another one of these young guys. Like, again, they've got young guys who are going to start, like, finally, it's got to be a pipeline. It can't just be like one guy every 4 years makes an impact. You got to have like every year from your minor league system, you're churning out talent. And I think that what I'm excited about is it looks to me like we could really see that this year. We have not seen that so much in recent years. You've seen odd guys here and there, like David VR, kind of come out of nowhere, but it's nice when it's like obvious guys who you can see coming, and it's guys who should do well and then do well. And so that's the hope for me, and I think it could start this year and early on in the season potentially. And also some existing guys like David VR, even though we didn't really see it coming, he had that monster year last year, and he's going to get an opportunity this year. So I'm excited about it. So lastly, the catcher situation for the Giants. Roberto Perez, it ends up being a minor league deal. That was the question for me. Will it be a major league deal? Will it be a minor league deal? It's a minor league deal, but I do believe he moves to the front of the line in terms of likely catchers. And Gabe Kapler even said, this was reported by Susan Slusser of the Chronicle, basically that the catcher position is wide open, and that includes Joey Bart. And so that is something to not overlook, because Joey Bart, I mean, he's had his struggles at times in the majors, and so he has a minor league option. So it's not totally out of the question. I mean, if he is striking out a lot in spring training, you could send him down, and you could have Roberto Perez and like Blake Sable, who their Rule 5 pick, who has to be on the roster or else get offered back to the whoever he was picked from. Was it the Pirates or the Reds? It was one of them, and then they traded them to the Giants. But I think it was the Pirates. He was picked by the Reds. Anyway, so there's four guys. There's Roberto Perez, there's Joey Bart, there's Austin Wynns, who's another non-roster guy, and then there's Blake Sable. And I think actually there's even more. So in camp, there's also Brett Auerbach and Brett Cumberland and Ricardo Genoves, and that's it. Oh, Patrick Bailey as well. Those are your non-roster guys. And then there's Bart and Sable, who are on the roster currently. So that's suddenly pretty deep at catcher. But for Perez, it's a minor league deal, but he gets $2.5 million if he makes the major league team, and another $1.5 million available in incentives. And so I think that there's a very strong likelihood that Roberto Perez is going to break camp with the major league team as long as he's healthy. He's got a great reputation as a defensive catcher and just kind of a leader back there behind the plate. Guys love throwing to this guy. He's an excellent blocker. He's a good framer. He's a good thrower, good pop times. And so it was kind of a need for the Giants, and they got one here. And so it was good to see that deal finally announced. And if he's healthy, I fully expect Roberto Perez to be a big part of the 2023 San Francisco Giants. That other spot kind of wide open, and I would not look. I think, as I keep saying, it's important for their young players to develop and turn into good players. And so I'm not giving up on Joey Bart, but also they're not going to tolerate if he's striking out 45% of the time, which he went through long stretches where he was striking out 45% of the time last year. And they're not going to put up with that. They can't. It just creates too much of a hole in your lineup where it's kind of like a pitcher spot at times. And so, the fact that Sable has to be on the roster or else be offered back, if he has a big spring and if Bart's showing a lot of swing and miss, then it's not out of the question. You could see, although one of the questions is Sable even a catcher? I mean, he kind of learned catching at the professional level, and he's more of maybe an outfielder. But so it's just not clear exactly what that catcher spot is going to look like, and it's kind of a wide open competition, as Kapler apparently said. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On MLB Prospects. Host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out a lot, so thanks in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Coming up later this week, we've got a lot more mailbag questions that I want to get to, and we'll cover anything else that comes up with the Giants, as spring training is like basically a week away at this point. So can't wait to be with you again then. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.